Greetings everyone, and welcome back to the old cybersecurity show, and thanks for watching because today's going to be interesting, backed by popular demand, a little more NIM. Today we are going to build a port scanner. Well, I've already built it, but we're going to kind of walk through the code, see what I did, how did I make this thing work. Spoiler alert, it's not pretty, but it does work. And there are some weird caveats to it, but it's interesting. You might be asking yourself, why did I do that? That's a great question, but before we get into the answer on that, please do me a favor, hit that like and subscribe and notification bell. And if you would, leave a comment. Let me know what you're thinking, what you like, what you don't like, and maybe you got some interesting war stories when it comes to NIM, or you've worked in another programming language and you also have felt the pain of creating something that's interesting. But now that that's out of the way, I do thank you for that. Let's jump into this thing here and tell you why did I build a port scanner. Let's start there. I think that's a really good place for us to jump off. Why did I build a port scanner? Well, right, because nmap's a thing. Why did you use that? I do use that. Trust me, this isn't something I would normally just use, but it is a good way to learn. Okay? This is something that I tell a lot of people. They'll ask me questions, maybe on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, by the way, so if you hit me on LinkedIn, it's a good way to get a hold of me. But they'll say, you know, how do I stand out from the crowd? There's a lot of competition when it comes to the cybersecurity field, and I want to stand out of the crowd. And one of the best ways to do it is to show that you're constantly learning and growing and doing stuff, trying to give back to the community. One of the ways I give back is what we're doing right here, right? I'm showing you things and learning stuff and sharing it with you via my YouTube channel. Another great way is through GitHub. Build something, and that shows that you have a desire. You're self-motivated. You have a self-starting mindset, and that's the way you are. It's the way you're kind of like built. And we like that in the cybersecurity field. People like to know that I can just kind of wind you up and send you on your way, and I can be a little more hands-off with you. And it's a great way to stand out. Just look at my GitHub repos and see all the things that I'm building and learning how to do that are geared toward the cybersecurity space. So I'm eating a little bit of my own dog food today and building something and putting it in my GitHub. Don't worry, a link is below in the description. So if you want to check that out, it's down there. And so I just try to decide, okay, what's something simple? What's a simple security tool that I can build that's custom for me, does things the way I mostly want them to do them, based off of my ability with the language that I'm working with. And a lot of people do this. You've probably seen the books like, I think it's like Black Hat Go and Black Hat Python from, I think they're both No Starch books. Great stuff, right? And they kind of walk you through building security tools in those languages. Well, I've been kind of kicking around with NIM a little bit. Thought, hey, like I said, eat a little bit of my own dog food, build a security tool, something simple. Took me, let's say 2 days to get my way through it, just with all the, hecticness of life, if that's a real word. As a father of three and a husband and all that other good stuff, and taking care of my home and doing my job and having time to film for you good folks out there. So I thought I'll build a simple port scanner, and that's what I've done. With that said, let's get into this monkey and take a look at it. I call it NimScan because I'm not very original or creative, but hey, got the job done. Fun fact, when I looked for NIM-based port scanners in GitHub, I am one of 4. At least of the time that I looked, which was yesterday. So there you go. Fun, good for me, right? I'm trying to spread the NIM gospel, as it were. Although anyway. So here we go. We got this NimScan final, right? Because I went through a few iterations before we finally landed on something I was happy enough with to show you good folks out there. Doing LS, I've got 3 files here. I've got my NimScan binary, the executable. I've also got my source code for nimscan.nim and scanner.nim, both things of my own device, right? So how does this thing work? Well, let's start off with the demo, right? Start at the end and work our way back around. So if I fire it off, NimScan can work in one of 2 ways. I can just do NimScan like this. It does say target IP, but host names work as well. I probably need to change that. So I can put something like scanme.nmap.org, because that's a site or a machine or some sort of internet host that has some open ports that is specifically for scanning. So I'll put that in there, hit that. My start port, I'll start with something low, like 20. So I'll hit all those low, register ports, and I'll just go up to like 80, for web services. Oh, I don't go up. It's the start port. Yeah, give it start port. End port is 80. So it's just kind of taking in. It's already found an open port, a port 22. And hopefully it doesn't take too much longer. I think it runs pretty quickly. Not too bad. We'll talk a little bit about some of my caveats on how well this thing works. But there you go. I found 2 open ports. La-di-da. Like I said, there was another way of which you could do this kind of command line-ish. So if I did nimscan and I did the target of scan me, yeah, .nmap.org. And then this is where I'm used to doing it this way. So if I did 20 and 80 and fired it off, there you go. You can just kind of feed that from the command line and let it do its thing, and you're off to the races. So very simplistic. I don't even know how large this file is. Let's do an ls-al. So I'll make it a little more human readable. So this is 119 kilobytes. So very small, not big at all. But effective enough that if I need to do support scanning, or maybe this doesn't have, you know, some antivirus signature or something like that, it wouldn't get busted, and I can kind of slide this into a machine that I've compromised and could use that to start scanning for internal open ports and scanning on that network. You know how it is when you're doing the old pivot trick, right? But there you go. Now, we've seen it work. It's relatively, there are some problems, quote unquote problems. If you use the command line, it's kind of like all or nothing. So if I do the nmap, or nmap, I wish it was as good as nmap. It's not. But if I do nimscan and I do the target like scanme.nmap.org, and I do just port 20, and I forget the next, you know, port range, you'll notice I get this like unhandled exception, index 3, not in 0 through 2. This is a weird way in which NIM kind of like reads. It kind of breaks itself. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on it. Ultimately, right now, I think I know a way to fix this, but right now, just don't forget. It just errors out, and you go, oh yeah, I forgot. I'm gonna put an end port on that and throw it out. The other problem is that I can only scan 1,023 ports at a time, and this is, I think, because what ends up happening is it freaks out because it starts opening a bunch of files, file descriptors in your Linux operating system. Anyway, I haven't tested it in Windows, so I should probably do that. But in a Linux operating system, it opens all these file descriptors, or basically files, and there's something inside of most Linux operating systems to protect it from denial of service attacks, that if you can only open so many of these socket-based file descriptors, and then it cuts them off. It says, "Nine, no more. You can't do it, laddie. Stop." So if you try to run 2 more, so I basically kind of break it up into 1,000 port chunks if I wanted to do a lot of port scanning and scan everything. And yeah, I could write a bash script to make that, but I'm gonna try to work on fixing that. I just don't know exactly how to get around that at this point in time. But there you go, a couple of caveats. I'm not a perfect programmer. I'm just like learning, and I've learned a lot about this stuff. I didn't know that about the Linux operating system, honestly. Fun facts. Another thing I learned was that the Windows operating system has a port scanning prevention mechanism built into it. And even if you make a firewall exception, if there is nothing on the port that's listening, the port scanning prevention mechanism still kicks in, and the port scanner was hanging. Like NimScan was just hanging and doing nothing. And I was like, oh man, what's going on here? And I had to do a bunch of Wiresharking and then Google searching, and I found that out. I said, oh, that's really interesting. And I'll show you the solution to that, which I did have a solution to, but really interesting stuff. Okay, let's get into this thing. So let's nano nimscan.nim. Yeah, there we go. And out of the gate, I do have some usage trying to catch errors of people. So if you, and we'll see this really quickly. I'm just importing my scanner file. This is for recursion, so that I can do recursion easily. I like recursion. It makes my life easy, so I wanted it, and it wasn't working in a single file, so I just broke it out into kind of like a library or a module, and then I'm just importing that in so that when I need to go to it, I can. I like things to kind of lay out horizontally instead of vertically. And nim wasn't really, you can do it, it's just not, it's not pretty. And recursion becomes very difficult. At least from what I know. There's all this future stuff you can do. Anyway, then I needed to bring in the OS from standard library and string utils for just some formatting and running certain commands. Like letting this numparams equal paramcamp, that's kind of how we're checking for command line arguments. So if I put that target IP and that start port and that end port on there, it's looking for that. You'll notice this is just what other programming languages call a function, they call a procedure in Nim. So I had to create a procedure so that if something goes wrong, hopefully you just get a usage procedure and it kind of kicks you out, saying, hey, you didn't use this right, try again. Good news is if there's only a couple of ways in which you could get it wrong. Actually, I think there's only one way you can get it wrong, is if you use command line arguments, you don't use enough of them, it freaks out. Or if you try to put a higher start port than the ending port, it's like, no. And how this works, ports go from low to high. So you should get this usage, and we check for that. And we'll see that here in just a second. And that's in here, in this proc main. So this is our main function, basically. And by the way, if you are a NIM programmer, I know you're probably screaming at me, we have functions in NIM. Yes, but if I'm not mistaken, they're more mathematical functions, and they use that term in the mathematical sense and not in the programmatic sense, which most languages do. So bear with me here, right? Show me some grace, if you would, please. That would be great. Let's see here. So proc main equals is my main function. This is the main piece of code that I want to kind of look through. And this is where I'm starting to search for, are there parameters, right? So if numparams is greater than 0, so there are parameters, then this is what it should be doing, which is taking in the target IP from first parameter, taking in the start port. I'm just giving these variable names, right? Of param string 2, that's the second argument. And then end port should be the third argument that you feed the thing. So fairly straightforward, fairly simple. And then I had to do some finagling with these start port and end port. Even though they're numbers that I'm giving it, it was seeing it as a string. But only when I use them as port. It was weird. It's weird stuff. There's a little, weird things about programming languages. Kind of idiosyncrasies, I think is the word I'm looking for here, that can make you want to go, I'm gonna kill somebody today, right? Because y'all gonna make me get upset and it's gonna be nasty. Yeah, I had a couple of those moments where I'm just like, if I had hair, I would be pulling it out. And, you have to work your kind of way around those little weird things. But I'm sure there are better ways to doing this, but this is what I ended up doing. It was just basically saying, hey, take that start port variable, do this parse int thing, which basically converts the data type from string to integer, and then save that inside of a variable called start port int. So that way I knew, okay, this is the integer version of what I fed from the argument into the start port. You get where I'm going here. It's a little weird, a little convoluted, but it does work. Okay, moving on. Did the same thing with end port. And then we have a little ifs block here, right? If start port is greater than or equal to the end port, hey, cannot have a starting port that is higher than the end port. Right? Did I want to do it that way? I should probably just do, right? Because if it's equal to, I'll have to fix that. I think that's actually wrong. I love debugging my own code right here on the fly as we look at it. Because I'm like, well, if I wanted to do, I don't even know if that will work. I want to test this live. Here we go. No training wheels, folks. Control X. Let's see here. So if I did .. You're like, what are you talking about, Daniel? Bring us in on the conversation. My God, man. Let's see here. If I do nimscan and I give it, I only want to scan for one port. My if block is telling me if the start port and the end port, so if start port is greater than or equal to the end port, it should error. We'll see if that works. So we'll do scanme.nmap.org. I want to see if that actually will let me scan. So we know port 22 is open. And if I give it the same port, yes, it does. I need to fix that. That's a bug. Because otherwise, how would I scan only one port? I would have to scan 2 ports. Anyway, yeah, I love finding out these little weird things on the fly. But there you go. That's a lot of fun. But there's the usage, right? That's that procedure coming right up going, hey, you didn't do this right. And it tells me, gotta have start port higher than the end port. Obviously, I kind of missed the logic on that. But hey, we can recompile that right now. So let's go in there. Let's fix that. Nano nimscan.nim. Let's get down in that and say 9. No, you have to be just greater than, not equal to. Do a little Control S, Control X, then we will nim-c. I've gotten into doing a little bit of the -d release because it says it makes it run faster. So hey, I'm all about that. It's not -c, it's just C for compile. And then nimscan.nim. Making sure nothing goes crazy. Yeah, good. So now let's see what happens. Nimscan with scanme.nmap, right? Scanme.nmap.org 22. Yay, it works. Look at me fixing code. It's fun. All right, back into the thing now that we've done that. Nano nimscan.org. .nim. Ooh, I'm a little punchy today. I'm having fun though. I hope you're having fun. Let's see here. Okay, so now that that works, let's see here. Okay, yeah, here's where we are. So if parameter is that where I got? Yeah, we're in the main. Okay, perfect. This is where we were, right around here. But we're gonna work our way through this. And you notice that it kind of fired off the usage when it was before, it was wrong. But now that it's right, I would have to have put like port 23, and then it would say, that's not how this works. So else nimportscanner, just kind of giving me a banner letting you know that it has started. And then we have a for loop here in our logic. So the for loop is saying, hey, take this pnum or create a variable called pnum, which is port number. And in this range of start port integer, right? So the start port integer to the end port integer, then run port scan. Now port scan is a procedure that I created, right? But it's in the scanner.nim file. Haha, right? And it's going to pass the pnum variable as well as the target IP variable, which is a string, and that's fine. That totally works fine, right? It's going to pass that onto this. So if we make it past this first if of, hey, your port numbers aren't really working that well, or hey, you have port numbers at all, then we're pretty good, right? So let's kind of work our way into that. Or do we want to come back? Do I want to come back? So yeah, let's go straight to it because it kind of jumps over there and that'll give us a little context. So for pnum in start port int to end port it, run the port scan procedure and pass it the port number and the target IP. So that means we got to jump over to the scanner.nim. So let's get out of here. Let's nano scanner.nim. And here we go. And the only thing I'm importing here is nets, because this is where we do the network connectivity stuff, right? Now we saw that when we created a reverse shell, a little bit of that action where we had to create a socket and start passing information back and forth. So if you didn't see that, you should totally check that out. And we create a reverse shell using NIM an episode or two ago. Let's see here. And I'll put a card, right? Is it on this side? It's on this side. That's where the card should be. Anyway, so let's see here. Proc port scan, right? So this is where I'm declaring that port scan. This little star right here, this is how I can say anything can use this. So even if you're not in scanner.nim, if you call or import scanner.nim into your code, you can call this procedure in that code. So you need that little star. That was fun to learn, but very cool, right? And you'll notice I'm passing it the pnum, which is an integer, and the target IP, which is a string, and then that equals, and then I get this weird, var a equals 0 thing. Like, what are you doing here? I'm declaring a variable that I'm going to use to help kind of move logic around. And you'll see that really quickly here. Then the simple stuff, var client equals a new socket, and a new socket is created. Thank you. And then I have this try except finally. area, right? Start with try. So basically what we're doing is saying, hey, try to do this. It's very similar to like if, you know, other languages you'll see, I think that even Nim does it as well, is try catch. But what I needed to do was work with any kind of exceptions and make sure that I did something with them so it didn't just, you know, crash the program. So I did try client.connect. So I'm making the connection. I'm passing it the target IP and the port, which is the PNUM, right? And then this right here. I told you, I think that, did I mention this? I don't remember now. It's so funny. My brain is totally scattered. So on Windows machines, they have that, they have this thing, which is the port scanning prevention mechanism that they have built into this thing. And it would hang the NimScan. So I was like, how do I make that stop? It's like, I started looking at, you know, I fired up Wireshark, started looking at the connectivity, and I was seeing that it would get to a closed port, the port I knew was closed because I'm testing, and it would just keep retrying that port even though it wasn't answering. And it would do this for like forever. And it was making the scans go forever, which was not what I was intending to do. So then I started looking at this connect procedure that is in the standard library of the net standard library, or the net library that's in standard library. And I realized that it had this timeout in milliseconds area. So I fiddled with the timeout in milliseconds. I landed on 110 because that seemed to be the best middle ground for scanning internet-facing hosts and internal hosts. Still runs really, like if you scan an internal host, it's fast. It's super fast. And I think I can scan about 1,000 ports in about 2 minutes on an internet-facing host. So if I tried to scan ports 1 through 1023, it would take around the 2-minute mark. I think maybe a little bit less, but I think that's about the right, give or take, right? So if this works, so basically this try means, hey, is this a true thing? Were you able to do this? If you are, increase A to 1. Just basically change A, I say increase, change A from 0 to 1, right? Now this is, we got to get into these exceptions, except on OS error. Well, so I ran across this OS error thing. If the port was closed, it would just like wig out, right? I believe that was what was happening. And give me this OS error. And I'm like, okay, how do I deal with errors? And that's how I learned about try and accept. I didn't know how to do this before. It's not something I'm really good at or have a lot of experience in. So, but basically what I'm doing is say, hey, take that error, save it as E, as the variable E, and then I found this lovely discard statement. Discard E. Just, I don't want to do anything with it. Just get rid of it. Okay. So if the port's closed, otherwise I'm getting like error, you know, port closed, no, connection refused, and then, oh, port open. I didn't want that in the output. I just wanted the open ports. So I had to discard those connection refused errors. Then I got this accept timeout error as TE. So kind of the same idea. I was getting a timeout error, and so I just say that as TE and discard that as well. Because again, it wasn't really the error wasn't impeding the scanner, but it was making it clunky. So getting rid of it did nothing to stop it from working well. So that's what I did. And then finally, right, that brings us down to finally, and this is where that A = 1 kind of comes back in play. If A = 1, then echo the port is open. You'll notice that's the only time A turns into 1 is when we have found an open port, right? The connection was good. We didn't get any of these exceptions or errors that we had to deal with. Things worked like they should. A connection was made. That lets me know that port was open. And this is a full 3-way TCP handshake connection, right? TCP 3-way handshake. Get that in the right order. Right, just like the handshake. And then, so that tells it, hey, if that is true, if A does equal 1, then echo the port is open and then tell me what the P number is, like the port number, so that I know that's the port. This is the iteration we were on. There you go, scanner.nim. Straight, easy, we love it. Little, yellow, different, new print. Back out, let's go back into nimscan.nim. And now we can kind of make a little more sense of what was going on down here. So let's see here. we saw that that was being called as long as the ports weren't, wonky. Now, I do have this else statement here, which says, write standard out target IP. Now, remember when I ran it in like interactive mode and it said, hey, what's your target IP? And again, I could come in here and change this to, remember I didn't say host name, but that is allowed. I should change that to say host name. And then I have this let target IP equal read line from standard in. So standard out is your screen, your terminal, right? The display. And standard in is your keyboard, your mouse, stuff like that. It's mostly your keyboard though. So that's where we're getting that. So that read line, what I'm doing there with this whole write, I was doing just echo, but if I echo, target IP, when I was reading in using this read line statement, this read line proc, it would jump it down to the next line. It just wasn't pretty. So I looked up how do you make it on the same line, and this is how you do it. Use this write procedure, and you say, hey, send that to standard out, and then it will kind of like along with this read line, do it all on the same line. So that was great. Excellent. Made it look a whole lot prettier, as you saw. And then we do the same thing for the start ports and the same thing for the end port. So once we have those elements, what I want to do then is, hey, take that start port, like kind of all that stuff that we did way up above that we're just kind of taking for granted. Well, here we have to take it in and then convert it, right? Can't just read it from the line because it's not there. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Because so I had to redo the thing again, right? So I'm taking in target IP, start port and end port. They're all strings. Now I got to convert the right ones, like the start port and end port, into integers, which we do with the parse ints. We feed in what integer, what variable or what thing I want to turn into an integer, which was start port and end port. And then we start all over again, just like what we saw before, which is the, hey, go that routes. So it's kind of recursively running back through this for loop, right? So once I start that for pnum in start port end port thing, and I call that port scan, it's going to keep iterating through that loop until we get to the end port. So until pnum and end port int are the same number, this will continue to loop, calling the port scan process, passing those arguments to it, running through that network connectivity, doing all the fun stuff in there, and giving us our lovely port scanner that I call NimScan. Again, I'm sure there's a better name out there for it, but that is it. Simple, straightforward. We love it. We like it. It's great. I will say this. All right, I'm going to bring you in close on this one because I got a little confessional. I like Nim a lot. I do. I really do. I'm probably still going to keep working with it, but there's a weird little thing. And the little thing is that it's not Windows. It's actually most antivirus vendors. Nim has a bit of a history of being used for creating malware. And because of that, they've basically just, they being the AV writers, have just said, well, Nim, or anything that's Nim compiled, we'll just flag it as malware. And you're like, what now? So if you install Nim on a Windows machine, it might get flagged as malware. If you try to use like the Nimble tool, or if you compile a tool and put it on a Windows machine, it's going to go, virus, you've got a no, and Windows Defender will go crazy. I ran it through VirusTotal, like I just compiled a simple echo hello world, compiled that to an exe, popped it into VirusTotal, and 11 vendors flagged it as a virus. And I'm like, what is going on here? So virus vendors, or AV vendors out there, please help us out. You can kind of get around this if you're a Nim developer by kind of doing some hopscotch with the version of Nim that you were using. I actually ran into this problem when I tried to run it on my Windows machine, and it flagged it as a virus. And I'm like, what is going on? And then I reinstalled Nim, and I had like a new build had come out, and that worked fine. So if you run into problems with virus antivirus stuff getting popped, going, hey, this is a virus and it's NIM, and it's not a virus. It's just simple things that your tools you're writing. And yeah, it's kind of part and parcel of the game. So a little detraction from my love for NIM. You know, you're gonna find all the warts when you get into stuff, but that's the name of the game. That said, thanks for watching, everyone. Hopefully you like that. Go out there and build something your own self. Put it in a GitHub. It's a great way to kind of show that you are self-motivated person, right? That you're going to learn, and you're a self-starter. You're engaged in the community. You want to know things. You want to learn things, and you kind of give back. And now I got a little thing. Maybe somebody forks this and does something cool with it and makes it really good. And hey, it all started because I just wanted to learn something, or it becomes useful for somebody in a weird edge case scenario. I would love to hear about those stories. That's really awesome. But I did enjoy learning a little more on how to work with NIM. That said, like I said before, thanks for watching. I do enjoy everybody that hangs out with me. I appreciate your viewership. And until next time, keep hacking.